Welcome back to another edition of the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild podcast, powered by Deercast. I'm Matt Drury, and this episode we are Timless. But that's okay. We got Mark Drury on with us from Iowa. He's coming off one hell of a week, and we're going to hear all about it. What's up, Mark?
Hey, how you doing, Matt?
I'm doing good. So I wanted to have you on. This will be probably the last podcast of the season, of the year, I should say. We're going to do some sort of like recap episode for the following week. But I wanted to have you on to talk about a few things. But the biggest one was the week you guys had, I guess as this airs, it'd be the week past. You guys had Luke Combs in, the country singer. He killed a big deer. Then you followed that up and killed a giant. And then Wade followed that up and killed a giant, all in consecutive days. So day after day after day, and all while Luke was in camp. So I figured we'd have you on and just chat about it and recap a little bit, because you guys had a hell of a start to the season. You had a really good, a couple days there where you killed within a few days apart, big deer in Iowa. But in general, I don't know that we've ever had like consecutive giant after giant after giant go down quite like this.
Second season's been good to us through the years, but I don't know that we've killed this size, during second season. But we've had nights where we've killed three. I remember one year where Terry, Gary, Taylor killed like a 169, a 152, and another 160.
True.
All in the same night. So second season, historically, it's one of the reasons we had feedback as one of our best phases in 13, because at this period, when they aren't interfered with in terms of a gun season during the rut, they really come back to food very well right now in mid-December. And there's studies that show that their movement, daylight activity peaks in the middle part of December. And then around Christmas, it starts to slow down, and they really reduce movement as they head into the winter months. Their metabolism slow down drastically, and therefore daylight activity slows down drastically. So every year we have a great run here in mid-December. This year's was exceptional, and Luke took it to the next level with him being in camp. He was in for, I think, 5 days, and he killed his buck on the second night of his hunt in Iowa. And then he and Ethan, who is his tour manager, Ethan lives in Missouri.
Yeah.
And is from Missouri. He's from Silex. He's a good friend with Josh Parks. They said, well, we're going to go to Ethan's farm and deer hunt down there. And I said, well, you're welcome to just hop across the border, stay here and hunt on my stuff. So he bought a tag and he did that. And he got really close on his second night there as well on a really nice 140, 150 class deer. But upon further review, they decided it was a 4.5-year-old deer, but they saw 15 deer that night, several bucks, and he was just a great guest. And then, of course, when they'd get back from Missouri, the one night I killed the 10-point with kickers, and then the next night Wade killed that giant frame 9-pointer. So, feedback and this phase lived up to its reputation, and we were just really blessed to have a history with two of those deer. Luke's deer we killed based on previous history, and 100% mine was based on previous history. Like he only showed up in early December every year, and we kind of targeted him because of that reason. We didn't know if he was still alive or whether he'd show up, but he did, and it worked out.
That always amazes me. And you mentioned that the studies show that they go back, like mid-December is good for like daylight activity and stuff like that, but What were you saying about the gun season when you don't have a gun season in the rut? Because like my cameras and I have enough pieces of property that I think I have and enough cameras out that I'm not experiencing that whatsoever in Missouri. So that firearm season comes and goes, and then there's a doe season, and it's like as soon as we get towards even when the moon was right and the weather was awesome, they still just barely moved before daylight or before dark rather. And then the bucks, they wait till dark, and I know we talk about that a lot. Like, well, maybe it's not close enough to the bedroom, but in general, it's across a bunch of different properties. I just don't think that's the case. Is that a gun season issue, where they're just getting hammered for almost 3-4 weeks, the pressure and the hunters and in the woods and all that stuff?
That's my gut. I don't have anything scientific to prove that, but my cameras are showing the same. And we're, geographically 3-4 hours apart. Your Missouri farm to mine, and mine are showing the same. And I just think that interruption of the rut with a rifle season and taking out a lot of those mature bucks during the rut, I just think it interferes with what we experience in other states that don't have that interruption in the middle part of November. That's my gut. Again, I don't have science to back that up, but I see it every year. I've got the tale of two states here between Iowa and Missouri, and also in Illinois with Terry's experiences over there. And I just don't see the movement in mid-December in Missouri that I do in Iowa in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's depressing because it's like, even if you're doing everything right on your piece in general, the amount of hunters out pushing deer, kind of, disrupting natural patterns and habitat, they seem to just not. It's like once gun season hits, it is nearly impossible to kill with a bow in Missouri. It feels like
it really gets difficult because they've been conditioned to that mid-November rifle season, and I think through time they've learned behavior to stop moving during daylight quite as much. Conversely, though, I will say this: the early part of the season, the Missouri bucks and the Missouri cameras we're watching are a little bit more active than the Iowa cameras. So I do see a tremendous amount of movement leading up to rifle season, but boy, there's a shutoff valve when those guns start popping. It really does make a difference. At least that's my gut.
Yeah. So with Luke in camp, usually we don't see that, or in previous years, it seems like those guys, when they kill, they head out of camp, because they're just busy. They got something else to do. They got to go here, go there. So it's pretty rare to have one of those guys stick around for 5 days, isn't it?
It was, and he was just such a great guest. I mean, it was like having you and Terry. And I mean, he cooked dinner one night because he wanted to show off a pot roast recipe that he has, and he is one down to earth guy, and it's easy to see why he's having the success he's having. Just a very sharp guy, a very nice guy. I can't say enough positive things about Luke and Ethan. They were the model guests. I mean, they were like, it felt like we'd known them our whole lives. It was crazy. They were really, really a lot of fun. They stayed up every single night till 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, music and just chatting. And we couldn't get enough, conversation in. Wade, Perry, Coondog, with those guys. I mean, we just sat around talking every night and having a blast. So.
Yeah, that's fun. That makes it, deer camp. That makes it special and fun when you can hang out, and that's how it was when we went out to Idaho with that big group. It's like that was pretty much the best part of the camp was after the hunt. The hunt was awesome, but that's the fun part, right?
It really is. And for those guys, they're on the road so much and in the studio and doing all the other things that they have to do with radio and stuff. And this was Luke's trip. He went to Kansas prior to coming here, and he killed a 168 there, his largest deer ever. So he was really jacked. And he said he'd been on a couple year run of bad luck. He hadn't killed much and didn't have a lot of chance to hunt over the last couple of years because he's been just so very busy. And he was just like a kid in a candy store because he killed that deer, and then he got here and killed the deer he killed in Iowa the second night, and he was like, we turned it around, he's on a good run now. And then he and Coondog went out here at the house and shot a doe to fill his doe tag, and then he went to Missouri and had a wonderful sit down there. So he was all fired up. He got back to Tennessee yesterday. He sent me a text last night. He had a big giant show up on his Tennessee farm. He's all fired up about. So nice. He's like, my luck has turned. But this was his trip, if you will, for his hunting season this year. Now he's going to do some hunting in Tennessee.
Pretty awesome. So your whitetail, you said you had quite a bit of history with, and he would show up in December every year. How old was that deer?
Fairly confident he was 6.5. The first time we laid eyes on him, it was myself, Perry, and Mom in a blind, and we were sitting there right here on this farm, and up over the hill comes this tight diamond rack buck and is walking straight at us. And Perry and I are looking at each other, and we were hunting a couple other targets that were really big, and we were like, who is that? And we just didn't know. And we ended up filming him a little while. He walked off the field, but we passed because it was not the target we were in there for. So Mom essentially pass the deer. She liked him. She likes to shoot every nice buck she sees. But Perry and I didn't know him, and we wanted to see if we could figure out who he was. So we passed him, and Mom ended up not killing one that year. She missed a couple, so we kind of had some bad luck. And then Barb unexpectedly did not do very well, so we left after just a couple days of Mom hunting. So we had a lot more time left. So if that was the last night of the season, we probably would have had her shooting that deer. But in our minds, we thought we had time, but in reality, we didn't. And then last year, in that same stand, Wade and I were hunting, I think late December, early January, and I was getting pictures of him, big kicker 10 point with kickers. And he came out, and I decided to pass him at age 5.5 because, again, there was another target I was in there hunting. And Wade was kind of miffed at me that night. He thought I should have shot, and I was like, oh, let's just see. And I think I even aimed at the deer, if I'm not mistaken. And then I pulled my gun back in and decided not to shoot. And then it's a roll of the dice, right? If you're passing a deer at that age class that's not on your farm, you don't have any control over what he's doing, September youth season through October and November. I have no idea where he was at. And lo and behold, early December, I blitzkrieged this farm with more stealth cameras than ever because if he got here, I wanted to make sure we had awareness to it. And he showed up like December the 4th or 5th, if I'm not mistaken. And there he was, we were like, oh boy, did he blow.
Oh yeah.
Did he blow, and it was easily made him a target, certainly. And in reality, that's the buck we were hunting the first night with Luke. He just didn't show up. And he had daylighted 2 nights prior to our sit with Luke on that field. Then we sat there and didn't see him. We had a great sit, had a big giant 8 point that was 7 or 8 years old out. And Luke wanted to shoot him, and I kind of held him off. I was like, I know you're here for a while. Let's be patient, And I hated to do that because he really wanted to shoot that 8. But after the week transpired, he understood why. I was like, just hold off. We've got some big targets this year. So, he didn't show up that night, and then the wind switched. So then we go to a different spot with Luke. He shoots his 8x6, that beautiful deer he shot. And that deer daylighted that night.
Yeah.
And then I told Wade, we got a full week ahead. The forecast was good. The forecast after this gets warm. And I was like, I'm going to buy a second season tag. So we did. We went back there, and he come out at sunset, walked the walk. I don't know if you've seen the footage.
You sent it to me.
I mean, it's just glorious. He's just walking.
It's a good kill.
It's great. And killed him. He ran 70 yards and died. And then I was like, you're crazy if you don't buy a tag. We got the full week ahead of us and some big targets, namely the one he shot. And he bought his tag, and that deer came out and that deer had been daylighting. I mean, the cards just kind of fell in place. I mean, this never happens where it's that not easy, but where it's just, it was just crazy how it fell in place. I mean, they were daylighting, and we went in and killed them first sit, both of them. So.
When you say daylighting, like what kind of time are we talking? Like right at dark, right before dark, or like early?
The buck I killed was about 5 to 5:10 p.m. every night was when he would show up. But after we saw what he did, he walked, 10 minutes across that big wide open cornfield, feeding as he went. And then Wade's was always out there at like 4 to 4:30. But the night he killed him, it was cloudy and kind of overcast, real deep clouds, and he came out a little bit later, but we killed them both, I think, at around 5, something like that.
Late season like this, does the cloud cover for you, is that a hindrance to them moving early? I feel like
I think it is, man. Yeah. I think they like that sunlight, colder temperatures. I think they like sun. And give me high pressure sunlight and a wind speed that sustains till dark, and that's generally the nights we see the best movement. What
type of wind speed though in the late season like this? Like you don't want like 15, do you?
I love if it's like 8 to 16 sustained.
Yeah. Because that's the thing. It's like there's so many things have to line up. It feels like when you get a stretch of good weather, it's great. But lately here, it's been a really good cold day, and then the next day it's really warm, and then it's cold again. Like it's north, it's a south, it's a north, it's a east, it's all over the place. It's not very consistent, where you'd like a few norths in a row and then go hit something, the first south, the first good south, but it's not been consistent enough.
It hasn't. And one other phenomenon that I think is developing over the last 3 years, we've been on average 10, 15 degrees above normal temperatures throughout the entire season, right? Just warm weather. We're not at normal or below. We're at normal and above. And I've seen these cold fronts shut these deer down like I've never seen it before in the past 30 plus years. Usually you get a cold front and they're all walking. And I've seen it repeatedly the last few years. They have to normalize to the cold weather in the winter before they'll start moving on a cold front. So I've seen some cold fronts absolutely shut deer movement down here the last couple of years. I don't know if you've seen the same, but it almost like a shock value where they just wouldn't move.
It's just been super inconsistent for me is what it seems like. And like last year we got that cold stretch the last week of the Missouri season, and it was so cold they all had to move. That was like the best movement I had, from gun season on, and it was the very last week of the season, but it was like 0, wind chills negative, below,
right.
10 or whatever. So outside of that, I just don't see any consistency with movement. It's like one day you think they aren't going to move, and then all of a sudden I'll have 20 deer on a field, and, and I wasn't hunting. It's like, what the hell? I didn't expect them to move at all tonight, so I don't know. I haven't gone much this late season just due to, work, family, that kind of stuff. I hit it pretty hard through November and burnt a lot of get out of jail free cards, I think. So I'm trying to wait for the right time. I'm going to try to go tomorrow and maybe go this weekend one day. But as I look at the cameras, it's like, shit, I haven't been missing anything. Or at least you don't think that, certainly they don't tell the full story. I try to put enough cameras out where you think you got a good idea, but certainly you go out there and you sit and you're like, well, shit, none of this showed up on camera. Only half of this was on camera. They were just behind the camera. So there's always that factor too, that you may just be missing something because you're not out there. It's hard to replace being there.
But no doubt, like the cameras only show, maybe 25% of what's actually happening. So, but in general, if you're not seeing shooters daylight, it probably is indicative of the fact that they're probably not moving too much. And in Missouri, I kind of like that primitive weapon season because it does occur after the first of the year. And if I'm going to see deer get back on a feed pattern, to your point, for us, it's been after the first of the year that gets really good. So
have you been seeing shed bucks though already? Like I started getting a couple, oddly enough. I felt like it was super early for that.
Not as many as I've seen the last 2 years, which I'm very happy with. But the last 2 years, I got slammed with EHD.
Yeah.
Okay, and they were shedding early and then dying during the winter. So I'm hoping this is an indicator of the herd's health. But for me, when they shed early, that's a tough indicator. I think that's you're probably dealing with some deer that aren't as healthy as you'd like to see them.
Yeah, for sure. Well, okay, so Wade's buck, that was a what do you go, 174 as a 9?
174 as a 9 point. I think there was another kicker or two, so he probably had a mainframe 9 with two kickers, if I'm not mistaken.
The mass on that deer was unbelievable. What kind of mass measurements did he have?
Oh man, they were huge, over 6 at the base, and carried it all the way out. And I'm fairly confident that deer is at least 7.5, if not 8.5 years old. And he actually had an eye put out on one side, and I kept noticing we'd get pictures of him, and I'm like, man, that one side's not glowing. And sure enough, when we got to him, he did not have it. It had gotten punctured. So in the back of my mind, I have a feeling that's why he was daylighting just every single night, and he's been that way since Thanksgiving. So I have a feeling that's what happened. I think there was a health issue there, and there was a reason he was coming to food every single day. He was coming, just
replenishing to try to kind of help survive, I guess, the next few months, or what?
When they get an injury, I mean, they show it. They get infections and EHD, whatever it is. I mean, they're not feeling well. So, I think it's just much more likely. In fact, I've made this statement before, the late season daylighters are really just exposing who's not feeling the best, in my opinion. I've talked about it before. I don't know if it was on your podcast or another one, but I think it's an indicator of health. And when those deer are daylighting every single day, there's probably something nagging them, and there's a greater need to go back to food source.
I must have the healthiest deer.
You might. But again, I think that Missouri phenomenon with those guns popping, it does make a difference.
Yeah. So, obviously this time of year, that phase feedback, you guys are heavily focused in on late season type of food sources. Will you see any kind of green, like you got a lot of, corn or beans or whatever, but what's the green food source? Do you see them hitting that this time of year, or they're past that, green revisited, it's over. They're kind of past that pattern.
In the places we have green, much of it's pretty much hammered, but in the places we have green on the warm days, they hit it. It's been pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
Because we've not had any snow cover. Oftentimes snow cover really reduces green usage, and we've not had that yet. So where we have green, it's been pretty good. They're on it specifically on the warm days. The colder days, we're seeing them on, cut corn fields or bean fields.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's next up for you guys? I mean, you got a one Missouri tag, right? Left a late season tag?
I do have a firearms tag, which I could either bow hunt or use it during the primitive weapons season. So I'm kind of excited about that. I haven't hunted Missouri late in so many years. So I'm excited to make that voyage down there on a daily basis and see what happens. And then I think Marissa's going to try some late season stuff, but Perry's tagged out, Wade's tagged out, I'm tagged out in Iowa, and we have one more guest as well. So we'll see if we can't find a couple more, but boy, it's warming up. I don't like that forecast. I mean, it's rain and 50s. I mean, that's not a great late season forecast.
How long are we talking? Like through Christmas to end of New Year's, right?
Yeah, into New Year's. I see a cold front after the first of the year, but I never trust a forecast that far out. So, hopefully it stays cold and we get cold for that final run there. The 15 days of January, the first 15 days, hopefully that's a cold and we can, have some fun right then. If it is, we'll do well. But if it's not, it's tough.
Yeah, if you're still trying, especially if you're trying to bow kill one anywhere this time of year, it's, other than maybe in the South where like the rut's starting to heat up. I mean, it just gets pretty tough.
Yeah, certainly. What is the date today? Now,
it's the 19th as we're filming. This will air next week.
Yeah, right now, I mean, this is peak for the folks in Mississippi. I remember when I used to go down there, they always said, don't miss December 18th. That's the day. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, they always love that through Christmas and then beyond. So there's parts of the country that are enjoying the best hunting of the year right now.
Yeah, yeah. All right, awesome. Well, so anything else from the past week or so that you want to cover before we kind of jump into some of the wildlife word and all that good stuff?
No, not necessarily. We're just watching our cameras and seeing where that movement is. I will say this: when you don't have the weather that you hope for this time of year, we're still above normal. We're still seeing good movement on days where we have a little bit of wind speed, where it's sunny, and where that pressure's up, 30.1 and above. We're still seeing awfully good movement, almost movement indicative of a cold front in a normal year. So kind of pick your days based on those parameters, and I think you can still do well. If you get too warm, they're probably not going to move very well. But high pressure, sunshine, wind speed, probably worth getting out there.
Yeah, for sure. Good advice. All right, so we're going to do some of the show standards here. We got Real Wild Clip today. All right, so this one, Mark, you're going to like, because our good buddy Scotty Heminger, he sent this to Ben and myself and Tim the other day. It's brought to you by Stealth Cam. See what you've been missing with the Revolver and Revolver 360 Pro cell cameras. And Scott pets a turkey here. Jordan, roll the clip. So Scotty's down there in southern Missouri, southwest Missouri, working, and he sent me this video of him and a turkey. There's the red-bearded beauty.
There he is, our brother.
That's right. I I got a kick out of that, though. Scott, he can't get away from the wildlife.
He can't. I wonder if something's ailing that turkey. I mean, it's very abnormal behavior, obviously.
Yeah, he sent us several clips of it just kind of hanging out at the job site there.
We had one the other day at my Missouri house. I was there one day, and there was this hen. I have some windows right at ground level that are basement windows, and she's just attacking her reflection.
Huh.
And she kind of eased off that day. We go back there later in the day. She's doing it again.
Huh.
And then the next day, her and an entire flock are there, but she's attacking the window again, the same hen.
Weird.
We had to shoo them off. Like, I was afraid she was going to kill herself. For 2 days in a row, she fought that reflection in that window. It was crazy. I think we filmed it. I'm pretty sure we did, actually.
That's really odd.
Yeah, it was very odd.
I have to put a piece of plywood over your window so she can't see herself.
Yeah, I'm waiting for her to crack it.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, cool. So we got a question of the day today. The question of the day is brought to you by Leupold Optics. Be relentless. Mark, what was your favorite Leupold optic for this fall? What do you use mostly?
I really like their scopes, man. Like, just the other night, watching that buck walk through there. I mean, I love their Freedom series, but this particular scope was, the VX6.
Yeah.
And it's just, woof, that's a Cadillac, buddy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a Cadillac.
You have this CDS dial on it?
Yes, we do. And, we were shooting a 350, so we're probably going to limit ourselves to 250 yards and in.
Yeah.
Shot was 130. Wade's was 168. Luke's was probably about 80. But boy, did that 350 do a number on those three deer. All three through the lungs. All three expired within 50 to 75 yards. They didn't go very far.
Yeah, for what that gun is, it's amazing how much dropping power it has, or how much knockdown power it has. You wouldn't think that straight wall like that would, but man, we've killed a lot of big deer with it.
I think a lot of it's the technology Winchester puts into that bullet. That Deer Season XP expands so rapidly and does such a job with terminal performance. It's incredible. But
yeah.
Back to your question, I really like looking through that scope and dialing them all the way up to 15 power. I mean, you're going to kill them when you pull the trigger if the gun's on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we got a question through SpeakPipe from Ethan McKay. And he says, what height do you typically try to hunt from in the timber? So this question probably a little more geared towards like the rut and middle of the season. But, when you guys are hanging your sets, and I know you don't as much anymore, but you do still have timber sets that you're hunting out of. What kind of height are you going towards? 20 feet, probably?
I always liked around 18, it seemed like 18, 20. Some sets were lower if the tree's big enough with enough back cover, 16. So I think a lot of it has to do with what your shooting lanes look like, what your back cover is, where you're at in the topography. If you're higher on the ridge, you can hang a little bit lower. If you're low, sometimes that's really tricky, because if they're on those side hills coming down in on you, they're going to spot you, no matter how high you get, it seems like. So I think you have to drop back, look at the scenario and go, where am I best hidden in this tree? And sometimes that's 12, 13 feet. Sometimes it's 17 or 18 feet. I always like getting up close to a fork, perhaps someplace that hides not only the hunter, but also, in our case, the cameraman. So it can be a little tricky. But if I had to pick one height, that's probably 18, 20 feet. Right, I
feel like back in the day, like when I was growing up, we were always higher. I felt like the sets were always higher. Maybe that was because I was young and it felt like it was 40 feet. But I feel like they were like 25, 30 feet high back then.
I think back then we probably did hang them higher, and then through time we realized we didn't have to be quite that high.
Yeah.
If you're out climbing the length of your safe line, then you're probably a little too high.
back down.
Yeah.
All right. The wildlife word. Today's wildlife word is brought to you by Muddy Outdoors. The new Nucleus heated base layer system is now available at gomuddy.com. I don't know that it's gotten cold enough up there. Have you used any of that stuff, the Nucleus stuff?
Wade and Perry have been using it. I have not as of yet, because it really hasn't been that cold just yet. I've got it all charged up and ready for, if we get some colder temperatures, but I put it on and tested it, and it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty legit. I love it.
Yeah. Wade was using it down in Texas, and he really liked it. We had literally the coldest day I've had yet was in Texas, of all things. We sat in a tree stand the last morning we were there with a 20-mile-an-hour north right in our face. The normal temperature was 31, and the wind chill was a little below 20, and we absolutely got pounded that morning and froze. Almost killed one too, man. Big old buck come in, and he just didn't finish.
The wind like that, I mean, you could have a cold day, and if you don't have any wind, it's tolerable, you know. But man, when it's cold and windy, it's like, holy shit, an east wind or something like that. You're like, I'm gonna die out here, man. It's freezing.
Yeah, it was really cold that morning, and we did not have the appropriate amount of layers with us.
Yeah.
For that morning, Wade did have his heated nucleus stuff, and that helped him. But I did not have the layers I should have had on, and I got really, really chilled.
All right. So the wildlife word. What word is used when both biological sexes of a species are indistinguishable from each other in overall size? Okay. Let's try this here. A, monomorphism. B, dimorphism. C, dwarfism. D, dism. Okay.
I think the first. I would go with the first.
I'm gonna go with A as well. Jim. It's A. All right. This is Mark. You missed it because one episode Tim was gone, and I had this kid that killed a 194 on, and the wildlife word was so hard I couldn't pronounce any of the words. It was embarrassing. We missed Tim that day. Most of the time I'm okay without Tim, but that was a rough one. All right, we got some shout outs. We got one, and by the way, leave us a shout out. Go to wherever you listen to or watch the podcast and leave us a little shout out. And Jim Richmond will dig it out and add it to the show sheet here. So we got one from Chris Little over on Deercast, episode 407. He says, never mess with Miss Lucille. I absolutely love me some Lucille. You hear me? Never know what she is going to say, especially if Terry or Mark screw up. Love the podcast, guys. Y'all keep on keeping on. And I think that was in reference to, we had Terry on a couple weeks ago, and we were reading that text message thread that we had between you, Terry, and I, where he said he was going to poke that lady's eyes out, and he was going to beat somebody's butt because they were talking trash about grandma. So
I don't get that. Like, you know, they're like, let her do that in public. You know, she's 91. We could barely get her. We could barely get her onto the farm.
You know? Barely get her out of the truck. All right, just shut the hell up.
I mean, she's an absolute blessing every time. And, you know, God willing, we were able to kill 2 this year, one with a crossbow, and she killed 2 last year. So, you know, she's killed 4 bucks the last 2 seasons. And every moment, every breath she takes out there in the outdoors is a blessing, you know. And the one gal was making fun of her hair. I'm like, what? These people, I don't get it.
Yeah. So last week she, which you know this, but for the audience, she had a presentation at her, at the place that she lives, at the assisted living home that she lives at. And she had a presentation about deer hunting. And so Linda, your sister Linda, and my mom Willa, they were heading there, and I showed up as well. We surprised her. When we walked in, her jaw dropped, and she was just floored that we were there, maybe embarrassed of us as well. I couldn't tell. She kept apologizing that we showed up unannounced, but it was funny. She gave a little presentation about hunting, and the people, when they asked her, because it was all older people that lived there as well, and they're like, Lucille, how old are you? And she goes, 91. And the whole crowd was like, oh, like they couldn't believe she was out there killing deer at 91. So it was pretty cool. It was awesome.
She amazes me. Every step she takes in the outdoors amazes me. She's such a fighter to go out there and put up with us. Getting her up here, she climbed into 2 different hawk blinds for us. And I was behind her. Perry was underneath, and we got her in there, and she said, oh, yeah, I can do it. You know, and we were practicing on the stairs here in the house. She said, yeah, I'll be able to do it. And she did it. So she killed her buck out of an elevated blind here. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I know at Dad's, they had one of those new Muddies on the sled or whatever, a new product that Muddy came out with. And so they, I think, were moving that around the farm, and that so that she didn't have to climb quite as high, but still, like those, like I find myself when I climb up into those platforms, like sometimes it's not exact. They're kind of like pretty steep sometimes, you know, the angle. They are. We've actually started adding blocks on the bottom to get that ladder away so it's a more appropriate lean.
Yeah.
Because if you're in any terrain at all, you can have a very steep climb. So we've added some blocks under the bottom of the ladder to get that a little bit easier to climb up and lean forward.
Yeah, smart. Mark, you guys are always doing the smart stuff. All right, we got some Rack Pack members. If you haven't heard about it, it's a private Facebook group. All you got to type in is 100% Wild Rack Pack over in the search function in Facebook and answer a few questions, and you're in. Every week I read some names. Every week I butcher the names. Every week there's a fake one in there, most of the time. All right, we got Bandon Carrier. We got John Wade Thurber. It's an odd name, John. Lucy Lastic. No way that's real. Brett Westmoreland. I know some Westmorelands. We got a mutual friend that's an absolute big deer killer in David Westmoreland. Kimberly Ward, John McGuer? Yeah. Blake Amber Triplet, Jordan Schumacher, and Nick Morgan. I'm going with Lucy Lastic as the fake name. If that's your real name, I apologize. That's it.
I would agree.
All right. Well, Mark, it's the end of the year. You made it. I made it.
It's a real feat.
It seems like it.
Getting to the finish line anymore.
Yeah, we've got a couple weeks left of the season with the holidays. Yeah, I'm sure you're going out to Utah to visit Taylor and Austin and Mabry.
I am. I'm heading there the 23rd, and we'll be there for, 4 or 5 days, and then back for that primitive weapon season, and then our other guests.
Good deal. Well, good luck on the remainder, and any parting shots for the audience?
No, just good luck. Sometimes the latter part of the season could be the best part of the season. If they start daylighting on a food source, they get very redundant. Therefore, you can pattern them. The trick is not banging them around too much on your way in or way out. Access in and out is so important, and if you don't have it, a great food source can go clear pretty quickly.
Yeah, and man, if one torpedoes them all back, that could ruin the night real quick. Like, there's so many deer if you're hunting food sources like that, coming out to a food source, and if you make a mistake or whatever, they smell you, see you, it could be that could ruin the night real quickly.
Very quickly, for sure. You'd hate to see that domino effect, because if you have deer out and they clear back, a lot of times they're in the woods standing there trying to figure out what cleared them. Coyote, sometimes a fawn running in will clear a field. Sometimes a buck nudging doe will clear a field. And it can definitely hamper that evening's movement.
Yep, for sure. Well, appreciate you jumping on with us. It was a hell of a week in Iowa. You guys knocked them down and some giant deer. So look forward to those upcoming Deer Season 24 episodes. And I think by the time this airs, that Luke Combs episode should be out. So
I think he's finishing it today. By the way, we had the most fun with Carson, Darren, and Mitch. Like, he's a practical joker, right? So they wanted to meet him really badly,
sure.
And they kept saying, "Hey, you guys need anything down there? Can we, blah, they're just trying to figure out a way to come by and see Luke, right?" So I asked Luke, I said, "Do you mind doing some interviews for this episode?" He said, "No, I don't mind." And I said, "Well, these guys are really anxious to meet you." So myself, him, Ethan, Wade, Perry, we were concocting a way to mess with Carson, Darren, and Mitch. So we come up with that Ethan was going to be the absolute worst, meanest tour manager, and Luke was going to be a prima donna big star, right? So we all are going to meet at Hatch at I think 10 o'clock for these interviews. So we're all standing around, and Coondog filmed all this stuff, so we've got this document. It's going to be funny on the episode. We're all standing around, and they're pulling in, and Luke just leaves as they're pulling up, like doesn't greet them at all. He just goes and gets in my truck in the back seat where the windows are tinted, and he just sits there. So Ethan comes over, and he preps the boys. He was like, "All right, you got 3 minutes. Would like to get it done in a couple if that's possible. Give me the place where he's going to stand. I'll bring Luke out." He said, "No pictures, no autographs, and make it quick. We're going to do one take, and we need to get this done, So he goes, "Give me the script. I'll go review it with Luke." So Carson's, I mean, he's all pie-eyed. He can't believe that Ethan's being this short with him, and Ethan played it off perfect, man. He was an absolute ass to these guys. And myself, Wade, and Perry we are dying inside laughing, and we're just kind of kicking the gravel and looking around. And Ethan goes over, sits in the truck with Luke for about 5 minutes, and then he comes out. And he was like, "Give me the microphone." So he gets the microphone, puts it on Luke. Luke comes out. He comes over, stands in one spot, and he's kicking the gravel, and he's given the worst interview you could possibly imagine. Just will not give any effort. He's just, no energy. They'd ask a question, he'd go 1 or 2 word answer. Do you like to hunt? Yeah. Stuff like that. And Luke starts losing it in mid-interview because he can't believe it's coming off like it is, because these guys are scared to death, right? And he starts laughing, and I'm like, uh-oh, it's over. And he goes, "Oh, I hate this shit. I hate doing this." Like these interviews, and he looks right at me. He's like, "Next question." I mean, we were dying laughing. He treated him like like he did not want to be there. And finally, after about 5 minutes of it, and Carson kept going, "Okay, real good. Next question." Carson was acting like it was
He was doing
good.
great.
He was doing great, And Darren's sitting there like looking at Carson like, this isn't going to work, And finally, we all bust out laughing and had some fun at their expense. But oh my man, did we have fun with those guys?
That's hilarious. and those guys, I bet they were like, "Geez, what's the deal with this guy?"
Oh, they were scared to death. He didn't say hello. He didn't do anything. He just walks over and Ethan's watching his clock, pointing at it like you're 3 minutes from almost. It was good.
You can't do anything in 3 minutes. Terry does one take in 3 minutes.
Right, exactly. It was a lot of fun, though.
That's awesome.
Of course, then he hugged him and high-fived him and did photos and did the real interviews and just knocked those out of the park, signed hats for him and stuff. So it was great. He's really a splendid guy.
Pretty cool. That's awesome. Well, that's fun to hear those kind of stories. That's that's the part of camp, like we talked about earlier. That's the part of deer camp you love, right? Cutting up,
Absolutely,
pranks, all that good stuff. So
the best part.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us, and congratulations again on a hell of a end to 2024. Can't wait to see what you guys do at the beginning of 25 with your last couple tags. So good luck rest of the way. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's.
Same to you.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in to this episode this week. Like I said, next week we're going to have a special edition recap, and you're going to want to check that one out. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's. If you're out grinding, be safe, and it could happen in a flash. Peace out.
DeerCast is completely updated and better than ever. Prep, predict, and pursue your target buck with our detailed maps, weather, and 14-day movement predictor.
We're adding new videos every week, so make sure to click that subscribe button and check out all of our amazing content. This episode of DoD TV is brought to you by DeerCast Maps, waypoints, weather, virtual rain gauges, and more. Every tool you need to get ahead of your game.